So, Satyanarayana Goenka himself cannot be called a sectarian Buddhist, but he can be called a Buddhist or a follower of the Buddha, in the sense that he follows the path of morality, meditation and wisdom given by Gautama the Buddha. Moreover, he can also be said to be trying to persuade others to follow Dhamma, which is not the same as Buddhism as a sectarian religion. Goenka can also be called a modern Buddhist, because he interprets Buddha's core thought and technique in modern terms and makes it available to all as the means to solution of individual and social problems. The theory and technique of Vipassana meditation, which Goenka teaches, is traceable to early Buddhism, and as a part of it, Goenka also believes in the doctrine of karma and rebirth. The question arises here as to what place the doctrine has in Goenka's total framework. Goenka interprets Buddha's theoretical and practical teaching not as religion, but as science. Basically, it is the science of mind. In fact, Goenka's formulation of the theory of Vipassana can be understood as a psychological analysis of sensations. According to the theory of dependent origination, Vedana is the outcome of the contact, that is sparsha, of sense organ and mind with the object. However, at a deeper level, the cause of pleasant and unpleasant sensations is craving, that is trishna or tanha, which assumes the form of what are termed as unwholesome roots, namely attachment, aversion and delusion, that is raga, dvesha and moha. Generally, a pleasant sensation is an expression of attachment, that is raga. Unpleasant sensation is an expression of hatred, that is dvesha, and the absence of sensation is an expression of delusion, that is moha. According to the theory of Vipassana, one is not supposed to develop attachment towards the pleasant sensation nor aversion towards the unpleasant sensation. One has to observe how they arise and cease and develop equanimity based on the insight into their impermanence. A stage may come when the Vipassana practitioner experiences only subtle sensations all over the body. The mind can freely flow all over the body without any obstruction. This is an indication of the fact that the impressions, that is sankharas or samskaras of the unwholesome roots accumulated in this life are considerably reduced. But after having such an experience for a long time, one may again have gross sensations. While explaining deeper causes of gross sensations, at a developed stage of meditation, Goenka refers to past impressions of raga, dvesha, moha accumulated in past lives as the possible cause. However, the notion of past impressions does not form a central part of his theory. Vipassana meditation involves experiencing present sensations, observing how they arise and cease and developing equanimity towards them. Anything which is not directly experienced and is a matter of metaphysical belief is to be bracketed according to Vipassana practice, during Vipassana practice according to Goenka. Hence, though the recipients of Goenka's Vipassana teachings include both believers and non-believers of different backgrounds, he in his Vipassana instructions asks them to bracket the belief that God exists and also that God does not exist, that Atman exists and also that Atman does not exist. I want to suggest that it would be consistent to recommend the same attitude towards the belief in rebirth and past karma. This could be the reason why S.N. Goenka does not insist that the Vipassana practitioner should believe in rebirth. Here, one point of clarification may be in order. The theory of Vipassana does not involve the doctrines of soul or God, but it does seem to involve the doctrine of karma in its psychological form, insofar as it traces the root of present sensations to the past accumulation of the unwholesome roots. My point is that the doctrine of karma, understood here, need not assume a metaphysical form which implies rebirth. Now, let us consider the other Buddhist thinker who can be regarded as secular in a slightly weaker sense is H.H. the Dalai Lama. A similar liberal attitude can be found in H.H. the Dalai Lama's treatment of the doctrine of rebirth in Buddhism, but now, unlike Goenka, it is based on methodological openness of Mahayana Buddhism. H.H. the Dalai Lama is a multifaceted personality. Apart from being a Tibetan political leader, he is a spiritual leader, a scholar and practitioner of Buddhism. He is also an engaged Buddhist thinker, as he, while expounding the essence of Mahayana Buddhism, shows how it is applicable for solving social, political and environmental problems. Another related contribution of Dalai Lama is his continuous dialogues with scientists. Through these dialogues, he, on the one hand, is bringing to the notice of scientists the scientific rigor in Buddhist theories and the challenges Buddhism poses before scientists. On the other hand, he is exposing the Buddhist theories to scientific scrutiny and analysis. Coming to the issue of rebirth, one can say that as a spiritual leader and scholar of Buddhism, he does acknowledge the doctrines of karma, rebirth and reincarnation, but while presenting these ideas before a group of scientists, he presents them in a non-committal way. Of course, Dalai Lama can do this because he, as a Buddhist practitioner, has a capacity to go beyond metaphysical commitments rooted in the tradition and try to see the truth in an objective way. For example, there is the issue of subtle consciousness, which is a key concept in the explanation of rebirth phenomenon. Accordingly, the transition of consciousness or continuation of consciousness series from one body to another is explained through the intermediacy of subtle consciousness. But is there any proof for subtle consciousness? Here I quote an interesting statement made by the Dalai Lama. Dalai Lama says, "I am practitioner, so based on my own limited experience and the experiences of my friends, I cannot say with 100% certainty that there is a subtle consciousness." It should be noted here that the Dalai Lama is stating this view as a Buddhist practitioner. A practitioner is not led by his beliefs or dogmas, but is trying to know the truth with open mind. In the same context, the Dalai Lama refers to the basic Buddhist approach, which is very open, and explains it in the following words. He says, "If strong evidence arises indicating that a given thing exists, then it will be accepted. On the contrary, if there is strong evidence that suggests the absence of such a thing, even certain things that are specifically asserted in the Buddhist canon the original words of Buddha himself, even then these words are to be interpreted on the basis of valid evidence and not to be accepted at their face value. This is how the Dalai Lama speaks as a scientific thinker and practitioner. This, I think, creates room for non-believers in rebirth to call themselves Buddhists and practice Buddhism. It cannot be denied at the same time that the Dalai Lama, in his role as a religious scholar and thinker, does regard the doctrines of rebirth and reincarnation as the basic tenets of Buddhism. However, when it comes to the question of the essence of Buddhism, he often refers to two principles. One is interdependence of all phenomena and non-violence. These two principles by themselves do not necessarily imply rebirth. His Holiness the Dalai Lama has been also advocating what he calls secular ethics. He advocates secular ethics as a spirituality which goes beyond religion. So, let us conclude. The examples of the above mentioned modern Buddhist thinkers and spiritual leaders show that it is possible to follow the basic tenets of Buddhism by rejecting or bypassing the doctrine of rebirth. Whether there is such a scope in classical Buddhism of Theravada or Mahayana variety is a different and a more complex question. Here it can be argued that although the classical Buddhist literature is generally in favor of accepting rebirth and other worlds, there are occasions where the Buddha allows the possibility of pursuing morality and spirituality without believing in afterlife. Similarly, in Mahayana framework, it is theoretically consistent to accept the doctrine of rebirth only at conventional level, that is samvriti taha or as samvriti satya, and deny it at ultimate level, that is paramartha taha or as paramarthya satya. With this we conclude this module. Thank you.